Joining us now to open up the program, Congresswoman Harriet Hageman from the great state of Wyoming. Congresswoman, always a pleasure. Really want to thank you for joining us here again on Breitbart News Saturday.
It's wonderful to be with you.
Okay, so lots to talk about here, but the big news yesterday, of course, is the Joe Biden Department of Justice or Injustice or whatever we're calling it these days has appointed a new special counsel. It's the same guy, the U.S. attorney, that was trying to do the plea deal. This new special counsel, of course, to investigate the whole Hunter Biden situation after the sweetheart plea deal fell apart in court. Your thoughts on this whole quagmire of a mess of a situation that we're seeing here?
I think that this just epitomizes the level of corruption in this administration in Washington, D.C., and these long-term bureaucrats who've been within the deep state, whether it is the Department of Justice, the FBI, you name the agency. But what in the heck has the guy been doing for the last 5 years if it hasn't been investigating Hunter Biden? And why does he need to be appointed as a special master to do his job? This is the same guy that gave the sweetheart deal. This is the guy who tried to give Hunter Biden immunity from future prosecutions for violating the law. And the only reason that he was stopped was because the judge smelled the rat and started asking some questions. What people need to understand is that there were two documents that made up that plea agreement. One that was the plea agreement that was pretty innocuous and you couldn't really understand what it meant. And then the second one was the real deal that gave Hunter Biden immunity until the end of time and also had all of these other aspects to it that would make it so we would never be able to get to the bottom of this. This is the same guy who took so long to charge Hunter Biden with anything that the most important tax aspects of the case against him, he allowed the statute of limitations to run. Now, he's either incompetent or he's in on the deal. There's no other explanation for it. Under no circumstances should he be the person investigating this.
Right. Okay. So now, I don't think. Okay. So I'm at the point now, Congresswoman, where I don't believe in coincidences with any of this stuff anymore, because there's too many of them. But I can't help but notice that this happens the day after Chairman Comer of the Oversight Committee comes out and says that we're going to start subpoenaing and bringing in for questioning into the Congress family members of President Joe Biden, right? So Hunter Biden, James Biden, Frank Biden, Valerie Biden Owens, that's who one would assume we're talking about here, right? When you're talking about family members of the president, those are the people that are involved in the business deals. So do you think this was done by the Department of Justice, Merrick Garland, at the orders of the president to shield his family members from congressional testimony in the ongoing investigations that you guys are leading?
Yes, I do. These aren't coincidences. These are intentional. The thing that was very important about what happened in that New York courtroom was that when I talk about giving Hunter Biden immunity, the point of the judge's questioning was, does this mean there is going to be no further investigation into his working for foreign governments and foreign individuals, the FARA violations? Well, of course, that was wrapped up in the plea deal. But what the Department of Justice realized as soon as that question was asked was, if we say yes to that, then the investigation is over, and we can no longer stonewall the Oversight Committee and the Judiciary Committee on providing this information. What the Department of Justice realized was the only way they've been able to shield a lot of this information from us is they keep saying, there's an ongoing investigation. There's an ongoing investigation. We can't comment on that. The moment she asked the question of, does this include everything, including FARA violations, they thought they could sweep that under the rug and then there would be no further discussions. But by having that question, what they realized is if we say there's no further investigation and this is done, we're going to have to start turning over documents and information to Judiciary and Oversight. So this isn't a coincidence. This is a further effort to cover up the Biden crime family activities.
Right. You know what it reminds me of, too? So now they're saying that this thing is headed for trial, quote unquote, right? Like this case with the Hunter Biden case. But I fully expect them to and I'm being facetious here, Congresswoman, I fully expect them to prosecute it to the full extent of the law. No, it reminds me of a scene from Boardwalk Empire. I don't know if you've ever seen the show. It's about corruption in Atlantic City, which is very close by to Delaware, by the way. The point is, Nucky Thompson's under indictment, whatever, and he works out a deal with the Attorney General to bring in some kid as the prosecutor to slow walk the case and not actually hold him accountable, right? It's very similar to that, right? Like, it's like they put their guy in there to go do this. They're not going to actually go after Hunter Biden. They're not going to actually ride this trial through to its full logical conclusion and try it to the best of their ability, because this is the same guy who tried to sweep it all under the rug before.
Yeah, that's the irony of it. And, I can't figure out if they're really, really, really smart, which I don't believe, if they're really, really smart and they're playing, they're three moves ahead of us in a chess game, or they're just in total panic mode. And I think it's the latter. I think it's, for God's sakes, we got to move quickly. We got to get something on the paper. We've got to get the letter out. So we've got special counsel, because we're going to have to continue to hide this stuff. Because the reality is that Joe Biden is a pawn. He's a tool. Joe Biden has been corrupt for decades, but Joe Biden is not a bright man. So you got to keep in mind that with Washington, D.C., one thing is always connected to something else, which is connected to something else, which is connected to something else. There are a lot of people who want to make sure that Hunter Biden and the Biden crime family are never exposed for what they are, because it has too many tentacles. That's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing is that you're absolutely correct. This is the big effort that if we can avoid this, any kind of exposure until after the 2024 elections, then hopefully we can retake the House and we can shut down these investigations. That's why it's so critically important that the Republicans win not only the House and the Senate, but we've got to win the White House. All of this needs to be exposed. We have a two-tier justice system in this country, and I don't know if you watched my questioning of John Durham, but the point that I made to him is, how long can our country survive when we have a two-tier justice system where people like Hillary Clinton and Hunter Biden and Joe Biden are treated one way, and Donald Trump and the J6 prisoners and conservatives and Catholics and parents who care about their kids' education are treated entirely different? And his point was very poignant, which is our country cannot stand. Our country will not survive this. And that's where we are right now. This is, when they talk about climate crisis and all of that, that's nonsense. That's about power. That's about corruption. That's about transferring massive amounts of wealth from the poor and middle class to the wealthiest among us. The real crisis in this country is a two-tier justice system, and we're watching it play out right now.
Right. Okay. So there's a couple more things to zone in on this. Then I want to get to some other major issues that I know you're working on. So the one of the ultimate ironies of the events of yesterday, I think it also exposes, as you mentioned there, the special counsel Jack Smith, who is going after President Trump in two different cases now, which is that ultimately, we know that the special counsel ultimately serves at the pleasure of the president, right? Like, they try to claim that special counsel Jack Smith is this independent person who's not political and not, doing the bidding of the Bidens. But ultimately, as evidenced by the fact that Merrick Garland just appointed by this guy, David Weiss, to be the special counsel in the Hunter Biden case, Merrick Garland could appoint or fire Jack Smith. And ultimately, President Biden could appoint or fire Merrick Garland, and as such could appoint or fire Jack Smith. So I think that it shows the political nature of the Trump investigation in that regard, in that ultimately Jack Smith serves at the pleasure of President Biden.
Well, I think that that's absolutely true. The reason that Donald Trump is such a threat to these folks is he refuses to play by their rules. And you can't have somebody in a position of power in Washington, D.C. who doesn't play by their rules. Now, I think that the House has done an incredible job. Jamie Comer and Jim Jordan, our select committee on the weaponization of the government, the various subcommittees, hearings that we have had. I think that our committees, the Republican committees in the House of Representatives, have done an incredible job of following the money, of pulling the strings, of connecting the dots, of bringing all of these things together. And again, I'm going to use the word. You've got panic going on right now because of what you say. Everybody kind of serves at the behest of the person right above them, ultimately going to the president. But who's pulling his strings? You know, I get asked that question all the time. Who's actually running this country? Because Joe Biden's suffering from serious dementia. And I think that that's very obvious when we watch him anywhere. So there's that issue, and that's the part that everybody is trying to avoid getting exposed here. Again, you know, the thing I have to say about Hunter Biden when people say, well, there's no smoking gun, and you don't see direct payments made into Joe Biden's bank account, and how can you say he benefited from this? All we have to ask is one simple question, and that is, what was the skill set that Hunter Biden was selling? Hunter Biden was, by his own admission, a crackhead from 2003 to 2019, a serious user of drugs. Do you think that these companies were hiring him to help them with contract negotiations, or that he was an expert in employment law in the Ukraine, or that perhaps he knew how to write very complicated oil and gas agreements between the government and the companies? The man had no skill set. The only worth of Hunter Biden was that he could deliver Joe Biden. There wasn't any other purpose for Hunter Biden. He has no talents. He has no ability to do anything. And yet they want us to believe that these companies and the Chinese Communist Party are going to pay him millions of dollars a year. He brought nothing to the table other than Joe Biden.
Yeah, it's really unbelievable. So the last question on this stuff, and then I want to talk about some of the things you're doing with livestock and also with going after big media companies. But is from the Department of Coincidences that aren't actually coincidences. Lo and behold, next week we're expecting Fani Willis coming out of nowhere from Fulton County, Georgia. Right on cue is expected to bring more charges, the fourth indictment against President Trump. I mean, it seems like whenever anything big happens on the Bidens, they bury it on a Friday afternoon, and then all of a sudden, by Monday or Tuesday, the whole story's changed, and another Trump indictment's coming. Every single time.
Yeah, every single time. You know, I do think that they think that the majority of the American public is astoundingly ignorant. And if you get all of your news from the mainstream media, such as CBS, ABC, CNN, and those organizations, you are pretty ignorant. You don't know about the fact that the Russia collusion hoax, the FBI reported to Joe Biden as vice president and Barack Obama and the highest people in their administrations on August 3rd, 2016, that the Steele dossier was a political dirty trick from the Hillary Clinton campaign. And then you think about what happened after that. You think about what happened to General Flynn, the appointment of a special counsel Mueller. Every single one of them knew that the Steele dossier was a political dirty trick, and yet they went forward with it. So again, what you're seeing is the corruption at the highest levels is finally being exposed. We have to thank God for that we're able to get this information out there. But the mainstream media is doing its level best to spend all of its time attacking Trump and protecting the Bidens. But things are breaking through, Matt. They really are. Things are breaking through. You can't run an operation like this forever and expect that it's going to be able to withstand any kind of scrutiny at all. You lie down with dogs, you wake up with fleas, and these people are absolutely infested from top to bottom.
No doubt about it. Okay, so Congresswoman, two other major things I want to talk to you about. You've co-sponsored legislation from your colleague, Congressman Dan Bishop from North Carolina, called the Censorship Accountability Act, which would allow U.S. citizens to sue individual federal government employees who engage in censorship of free speech on social media. Can you talk to us about the Censorship Accountability Act, why you've co-sponsored it, why you think it's a big deal?
Well, actually, it's broader than that. It's any violation of our First Amendment rights, our the free exercise clause, our right to freedom of religion. It's the First Amendment freedom to speak. So what we've done is we've basically crafted this after what's called 42 U.S.C. Section 1983. Section 1983 is a civil rights statute where I can sue a state actor for violating my constitutional rights. but it doesn't apply to federal employees. So what Representative Bishop and I have done is we've taken that same language from Section 1983, we've inserted the First Amendment. So if a federal employee violates someone's First Amendment rights of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association, freedom of the press, freedom to petition your government for redress, you can actually sue them for money damages personally. We had an opportunity to talk to one of the top constitutional scholars in this country on this, and he said this is a long time in coming. This is overdue. This is exactly what we need so that we can rein in these unelected bureaucrats that are going after parents and going after Catholics and going after people who just want to talk about what in the heck is going on with COVID-19. So we have introduced this bill. I'm hoping that we have bipartisan support for this. Everyone should want to protect our First Amendment rights, and this makes sure that federal employees are held accountable for their bad acts.
Right. Okay. So now, also, in addition to that, one other major thing that you're on top of here, you have an amendment to HR 4368. This would prohibit the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, from implementing and finalizing a rule that would require farmers and ranchers to tag, have all sorts of different EID tags on cattle. Can you talk to us about what the rule is, what your amendment would do? Walk us through this situation.
Sure. The USDA, the big packers, and the eartag manufacturing companies for years have been trying to force our livestock producers to use what is called electronic identification. I refer to it as RFID, but it is electronic identification where we would tag all of our cattle, and then our federal government can surveil all of our ranchers and food producers too. Wouldn't that be a great idea in light of what we've seen them do over the last several years? The point of this from the packer standpoint, and obviously the eartag manufacturing companies, this is for them to make a lot of money, but it's going to devastate our independent ranchers and farmers. According to the USDA, it will cost our industry an additional $26 million a year. That's absolutely a lowball figure that is absurd on its face. In 2013, the USDA estimated that if they imposed a full EID requirement on our cattle producers and bison producers, it would cost $2 billion. The purpose of this is to try to vertically integrate the cattle industry the same way they have the pork and the chicken industries. So Tyson, for example, owns the chicken farms all the way up through slaughter, all the way through what you buy in the grocery store. Independent cattle producers and bison producers are some of the last independent family-owned businesses that we have in this country, and the four big packers and the eartag manufacturing companies want to change that. So this is the USDA's effort to try to vertically integrate the industry. It will substantially affect our food supply. It will substantially affect the cost of beef and buffalo in the grocery store. And it isn't going to improve traceability. We already have traceability and identification. We have brands, we have back tags, we have tattoos. We have many ways in which we identify and trace livestock. And here's something else. We have the safest, highest quality meat in the world. There isn't a problem that they're trying to fix. They're trying to get rid of the independent cattle and bison producer. That's what this is about. The USDA needs to be blocked, and I have introduced an amendment to make it so that they cannot use any funding to try to implement this newest surveillance technique.
Really incredible stuff. Congresswoman Harriet Hageman from the great state of Wyoming. Where can people go to learn more about you, get involved if they so choose?
Well, sure. You can go to HagemanForWyoming.com, which is the campaign site of things, and you can also go to my official email address and my official website, which is Hageman.gov, US.gov, and there you can see what all I'm doing in terms of the bills that I am co-sponsoring and sponsoring. You can read the editorials that I've been doing. You can also watch the videos, my questioning of Mayorkas, my questioning of Christopher Wray, my questioning of John Durham. You can see all the videos of the things that we have been doing in our committee work, and you can also see where I'm going to be going in Wyoming, what I'm going to be doing, And so there's a lot of different places where you can get information about not only the campaign side, but the official side working in Congress.